Hey, it's Pastor Benjamin of Community Evangelical Free Church. So this weekend is the 1-year anniversary of our COVID shutdowns, or at least the beginning of all the iterations of changing the way we've done church services over the last year. And so that's been on my mind. I don't know if it's been on your mind to think through it as a calendar year. I know we've all been thinking about COVID for a long time. And I just want to jump in front of the camera here and talk to you for a few minutes to help get our minds prepared for what we're going to do on Sunday. We're going to have a service that in many ways will feel normal. This will be a sermon, and the sermon will reflect a teaching from God's Word that will interact with some of these themes. But we're also going to have a time of lament. And in this time of lament, we're going to be reckoning with the many losses that many of us have experienced over this last year. But we're not only going to do that, we're also, I think, Lord willing, going to be pointing to hopes and encouragements and lessons that the Lord has taught us over this last year, even if they were hard-won. I just think about my own life and pastoral ministry and the lessons that the Lord has taught me that I wouldn't have chosen. That in a sense, if you're like, hey, if you weigh the scales of like, learn this lesson or don't learn this lesson, is it worth it? I might choose, I don't know if it's worth it. But at the same time, in God's goodness, He has chosen to lead us through a hard time. And I am very thankful for where He's brought us. And all of this was coming to me over the last month or so. In fact, I wrote an article about it. I know you can't see it here, but it's called When My Church Was Washed with Butter. And I don't know if you know about the Gospel Coalition. It's a website that they have conferences, but they have this website where they're just posting good content, I think, every day. And so that's a great place to find articles. And they were kind enough to feature this article I wrote last week called When My Church Was Washed with Butter. That's a really goofy line. I know that. That's why I wrote it that way. But it comes from the book of Job. In chapter 29 in the book of Job, Job's lamenting the loss of his former life, where he's saying, okay, there was a time where I felt like the Lord watched over me. There was a time when I stood up for injustices. There were times when I had my children with me, he says. That's part of Job's tragedy, is he lost his children, as heartbreaking as that is. And so he sums that all up in this one line, at least in my thinking. The summary is chapter 29, verse 6, when my steps were washed with butter. And so my article, if you would like to read it, you can just reflect on some ways I felt like our church was washed with butter before all the trials and hardships we went through. Things like the loss of the cafe. I mean, I walk into our cafe as I do during the week and then on Sunday mornings, and I see that plastic tarp over our coffee mugs and whatnot, and I just think, that's okay. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. I think about our pews at church and how we've got painter's tape on them. And I understand it, like it makes sense. But I'm like, that pew is for sitting and for people and for worshiping the Lord. And why do we have painter's tape on it? And again, I know why we've done it. But there's a sadness to that. But I also think there's a real beauty to what the Lord has done. We never would have had outdoor services, and some of them were too hot, especially for me and others who were preaching up front. They were definitely sweaty services. But there was a time we thought, okay, we'll just fit 75 people here. And by the end of the summer, there were services that had 250. And we were, I just felt like they were these sweet revival services, like in an old school type of way. And so I just, in summary, I think, come to church this weekend thinking about ways that the Lord has carried you and your family and your friends and those you love and our church through this hard time. And so we're going to reflect on all of that, and we'll see you this Sunday.